Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with jazz teacher and musician Dan Thomas and a few of his music students. Jacob Schwartzburg, he's a freshman saxophone player from Denver, Colorado, and Josh Blythe is a first-year grad student and drummer from Columbia, Missouri. He heads up the program down at Umkc with Bobby Watson, and over a good conversation about his life and teaching and the music, we learned quite a bit about the jazz program at the University of Missouri, Kansas City. And both Jacob and Josh opened up about their time at UMKC, what brought them here to town, the Kansas City scene, and so much more. The collaborative conversation was key and instrumental to understanding the program and getting a better insight into Kansas City jazz. So get to know all of them and dig this interview, my friends. Thank you for being here, and let's talk about jazz education.
We're glad to be here, man.
And we're going to delve in a little bit more into your life and music and what's going on. So Dan, I'm going to start with you. What I want you to do as an educator is to give me kind of a trajectory, a geographical path of sorts to Kansas City. How did this happen? How are you here right now?
Personal story or otherwise?
Oh, let's just mince both. Well, let's do this. Let's start at childhood. Talk to me about your childhood. Where'd you grow up?
I'm Canadian.
Yes.
So I grew up primarily in Winnipeg. Music surrounded my life there. Both my parents played piano. My mother went through the Royal Conservatory as a classical pianist. Neither parent ended up choosing it as a career, but it was definitively in our home. My brother was an audiophile, just exposed me to all kinds of fantastic music. In fact, took me to some of my first jazz concerts. I mean, he was just very much interested in everything. I mean, you reference, some hard rock stuff as we come in here. Yeah. He was into that as much as, just some obscure jazz recordings and whatnot. And sure. He played the saxophone, suffered a pretty tragic incident at 15. He was a tenor saxophone player, starting pitcher on the baseball team, point guard on the basketball team. At 15, ended up in a car wreck, and his right arm was ripped off. He was right-handed, had to relearn to write, whatever. And the story there is, which I'll digress just very, very quickly. We took a family vacation to Disney World for my grandmother's 90th, and so we took the great-grandchildren, and we all held post up at the Hilton. Yeah. And so my brother and I are out late every night, just gabbing, reminiscing. We don't get to see each other very often. He's in Vancouver. He's got a busy career as well. And, I'm like, man, I feel really bad because my parents, while he's going through rehab and recovering and relearning how to tie shoes, and, at that age, you're struggling to find yourself. I said, man, I feel really bad that mom and dad, like my daughter is the age you were when you had the accident. Like, this is... wow, and I would probably say all things are off basis. Well, so it's with mom and dad, man. They let me grab your saxophone while you're just getting home from the hospital and, dealing with in-home rehab, and like, this is brutal, listening to you struggle. And he's like, well, no, they asked. And my brother at 15 was like, no, Dan's got to be able to do what it is Dan wants to do. And so I found my salvation essentially in the horn. Nice. And I played piano, but I found my salvation in the horn through my brother's accident, and found my life, as a result of that. And so it was very healing for me. I wasn't able to go out and play catch with my brother. My father was a very busy business executive, so I spent a lot of time with my big brother, and while he was healing himself, I was healing from that, through the horn.
Very cool.
Yeah.
That's nice. So growing up, what jazz did you listen to? What was swaying you?
A whole lot of things, man. I mean, I was very much interested in Cannonball and Bird, of course. Some obscure things in my country. There was a kind of an avant-garde horn band sax quartet thing that made the equivalent of MTV on Much Music there, and they were doing high school tours and national tours, but they were like, Dire Straits was down here. Yeah. And a group called the Shuffle Demons with 4 saxophone players were happening, in Canada at the same time. So it would be like Dire Straits on Much Music at the same time. And then the next group would be this jazz sax quartet, and they weren't a jazz sax quartet per se, but they were really good players. They were out of Toronto and had gone through Humber College, and I think a couple of the guys are still teaching at Humber College there. I mean, they're great players.
Yeah, sure.
They'd be stars on our scene too.
Yeah, cool. So, what got you to the States? What was the ultimate leap here?
17 and just come down to pursue and a lot of opportunity down here. Jim Mayer had come down, and we went to the same high school. He's many years in front of me, but it's all a wash now, right? It compresses as we get older. But he had come down and had some good experiences, and Kansas City was one of the places. So I've traveled around. Prior to coming to Kansas City, my wife and I were kind of gainfully employed on the West Coast. I was teaching just outside of Portland, Oregon, and playing between Vancouver and Keystone Corner, and just kind of moving, like San Francisco, moving up and down the coast. And we decided it would be a good thing for maybe me to consider looking at getting a master's degree, just cause.
Yeah.
And the deal was Monica's got to land a gig. This is pre-internet, and she's got to land a gig over the phone.
Right.
So I had some very good offers at assistantship offers at Rutgers and Miami, and I was looking at some key places. So New York, obviously, Miami was great. Kansas City was great.
Yeah.
Kansas City offered her a job, and it was actually the time where Jim Mayer was leaving town.
Right.
He left for a little bit.
Yeah.
So I ended up over the phone getting 3 nights a week before I even came here, locked up, and some good revenue to look at coming back to school.
Yeah.
And Kansas City has been great for me. I mean, we stayed partly and largely due initially to, and so glad we did, but my wife, the surprise of our first child.
Yeah, right.
The surprise of the first child. It's like we had terminated our condo lease in the plaza.
Yeah.
And a couple days later, she's like, "Yeah, I'm pregnant."
It's a game changer.
And I'm like, "You're not. Your doctor told me that this is foolproof." And so I went in and I'm like, "Dude, no, you said." And he goes, "Well, consider yourself lucky. You're part of the 0.1%.
You're Superman.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what you are.
Exactly.
That's nice. So, the focus here is on education, and I want to get back to what pulled you in, and I want to talk about you getting pulled into the Educational Summit. But I just want to make sure that I get an idea of your performing history in Kansas City when you got here, leading into education, just kind of to get a backbone of who you are as a performer. So give me an idea of when you came here, who you gigged with, and how you really got your
99, I think it's got to be 99. And when a new guy comes to Kansas City, it's kind of key to the city.
Yeah.
So the Blue Room is kind of fresh. Early gigs at the Blue Room were, I think, Todd Strait and Bob Bowman, and and I'm getting my picture outside, and it was fantastic. Brom was tremendously generous with me, and brought me in with Tommy, and I mean, that was an experience. I mean, playing with Tommy Ruskin and Brom too, man. I mean, those guys are as good as it gets for that early swing. Played with Rusty Tucker and Lucky Wesley, and I would just sit on break, and I would pose one question and get more history than is in any history book about the kind of the birth of what happened here in Kansas City, and they had firsthand stories. I mean. Why does Lester Young play like this versus like this? And, well, you're on a stage that's similar to that, Dan. So, it's like he had obstacles in the way, and it became a habit, This is according to Lucky. I believe it.
Sure.
And then out of a number of those experiences, I played with the Boulevard Band, and then he had a small group. And that consisted oftentimes of Todd Strait. Yeah. That is where I met Roger Wilder.
Yeah.
And out of out of that ensemble, I pulled Roger Wilder. I met Craig Aiken through that as well.
Yeah.
And out of that spawned my quintet, which initially was a quartet.
Right.
Joe Parisi ended up joining Umkc and said he could play, and we would gab.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm not sure he can play. You know, he's institutionalized. There's no way this guy can. Like, he's not one of the cats.
Yeah.
Like, all of us learned on the street.
Yeah.
He can't be. I brought him on a gig, you know, with my quartet.
Yeah.
And if he can play, cool. If he can't, I'll throw some money in his pocket. I'll give him one chorus,
Sure.
and I'll take long extended solos. And he was killing.
Yeah.
So brought him in, and the quintet was born. I was fortunate to be working at Jardine's with other groups.
Yeah.
But the manager at the time was the building manager also in the building that my wife and I lived.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it was very easy for me to work there.
Yeah,
As much as I wanted to, just based on social interaction. And, I mean, musicianship, of course.
Sure,
But
sure.
that social interaction, I think, was an advantage for me as well.
Yeah.
In getting into that club as a band leader very, very early on.
Sure.
And having a mainstay there for 8 years or so.
Yeah.
With my crew. And Brahms Group, too. Fan out from Brahms Group as well. He had... he started a 7-piece, so we worked with... The 7-piece was started with Myra Taylor.
Yeah.
And so we were backing Myra Taylor, and then that just kind of, you know, fanned out into its own thing, and had a regular stand. And that early on had Tommy and Lucky and,
Yeah.
you know, just some great players.
Yeah. You know, the thing about Kansas City is that there's always been kind of a rebirth, a revival of the scene. And it seems as though the 90s was huge, very instrumental. Would you say that when you came here and you were getting involved with these cats, that there was a real revival that was happening that probably made you really want to stay here and educate? And
Well, there's no question. I think at that time, the advantage that my generation has, and folks older, were that you were directly linked one generation or a side generation to Bird.
Right.
So when Eddie Saunders comes around and speaks to you,
Right.
it resonates.
Yeah.
Art Jackson. I mean, Art Jackson, I used to pack his saxophone for him because he played, the Scamps played the opening act.
Yeah.
And Art used to go, take care of your teeth. I can't feel a fucking thing. You know?
Yeah, right.
And that's it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Early gig with Jay McShann. I don't know what year that was.
2005.
So that's late, right?
Yeah.
But that's late.
Totally.
But like Jay, you know?
Yeah.
I mean,
Wow, that's awesome.
and he put his contracts on the old contracts. That was the only one I saved. But, you know, I'm like, oh man, I found this old contract of Jay. I'm like,
That's macho. I mean, that's like the thing. That's it. That's yeah. Very cool.
Jay, what are we gonna play? Music from the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. I'm like, huh, that's a lot of music. And he would noodle like a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and then we'd be in it.
Yeah.
And I would always go over to Tommy, what one are we in?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, right.
He would just,
I've heard that.
here we are.
I've heard that. And the thing that gets
Never
me
called
about
it
Jay is that, from what I understand, he was kind of like the Dizzy Gillespie. He was always infectiously cool and happy and ready to go, curious, adventurous. But I can't remember. Someone did tell me that when they did a gig with him, it was just like, bam, you just walk in and it's the frying pan. Just the way he did it. He was old school. He just came in, you just hopped in.
Yeah, oh, he never called a tune.
Yeah.
He never gave a tune title, and he would introduce just little bits of themes at the beginning.
Yeah.
At least with me. I don't know whether other people had the experience, but I just remember like, I don't know what we're doing.
Yeah.
And I gotta play the melodies.
Yeah.
And honestly, he was so old school that I don't even think he cared whether or not I played the melodies. I think he was just concerned with us playing good music together.
Yeah.
Which is very, very cool.
Yeah, without a doubt. So you think those guys like him and Ahmad Al-Adin and all these guys that were really cultivating the young talent knew what they were doing, that they were passing a very early torch from the Charlie Parker days, the early days, and giving that to you and hoping that Kansas City was going to resonate?
I think it's... I think each generation has a responsibility to be curator and innovator.
Yeah.
Right? And if you miss the curator thing, you're uninformed.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So there's a lot of information that goes on. And I mean, that happened for me on the West Coast. I mean, guys were literally, and it was ruthless, but like they'd take the horn out of my mouth.
Wow.
Too many notes.
Wow.
Or lay into you, and you run with your tail between your legs, perhaps. Pack your horn, and are you courageous enough to come back? And then they welcome you with open arms.
Yeah.
And they modify.
Yeah.
And that was kind of how I grew up. Play a wrong note, people pick on that note. Play a right.
Yeah.
Why are you using that vibrato or whatever? Like just modifications, and if they welcome you back to the stage, you've actually got a safe place. Right. It's just their teaching style, and teaching style on stage is very different. I've got a couple guys that are professional players that come through here, and I was actually talking about that. If we were not in my basement, and we were on stage, I would say these things very quickly to you.
Right.
But we have the advantage of time.
Right.
And modify, practice, work. But if we're on stage, I might just yell at you to slow down.
Yeah.
Take a breath.
Right.
Live.
Right. Yeah.
And that's okay.
Sure. It's a different environment. Talk to me about your first gig and why you wanted to educate, why you wanted to get into the jazz education realm.
I can tell you, yeah. So, I chose to teach. This is not a fallback. This is not, my mother taught in the inner city.
Right.
And it's just tremendously valuable to change lives, right?
Right.
One. Two, the whole idea of like Bleeding Gums Murphy, or Bobby and I talk about that from The Simpsons. This idea that jazz musicians can't make money is a flaw. And I grew up surrounded by business. My father, like I say, was a highly successful executive. My brother, so like we talk business, and as my son's got it, he goes to school with these little fidget spinners, or not fidget spinners. The tech decks.
Oh, tech decks. I got you. Yeah.
Okay, so So he gets these tech decks, and he's selling them at school for $20, but he's getting them for like pennies.
Nothing. Yeah.
The education standpoint for me is hugely important for people to actually see their potential, see their future,
right,
and to help them execute it. And if they love jazz. And I'm really proud of Josh, who's here. He's doing some really fantastic things in terms of diverse portfolio of earnings.
Yeah.
And that's what's necessary. If you're just a player, it's not going to happen.
Right.
If you're just a teacher, you're not going to be able to teach it. I don't believe you have to be actually practicing what it is because things are evolving consistently.
Sure.
They're moving forward.
Right.
And it's just necessary for us to, stay in those lanes. And then the other part is from revenue generation is just like composition and arranging, and those things feed.
Right.
And then the program right now is built on 5 pillars, and they're all represented on my taxes.
Yeah.
So that's where I built it, and this is what we're doing. The 5th one is entrepreneurship.
Right.
And sometimes guys look at like initiative and that sort of thing as just getting in the practice room. Right. And that's great, but if you're just a great player but you don't have social skills, you are not in active pursuit of your craft.
Right.
Who hears of you? You're stuck as a sideman.
Right.
We are all entrepreneurs. I do a lecture for our Muse class, and raise your hand if you identify first and foremost as a musician. I'll explain the population of that. Yeah. Or if you identify yourself as a businessman or woman. And this is for all of our freshmen at Umkc.
Sure.
And the whole class almost is, I'm a musician.
Yeah.
I'm like, you're wrong. That's your product.
Right.
Right? And so there's an advantage, I think, to having a professional career aside, and the education thing as an aside, and putting those two things together to help mentor.
Yeah.
I was fortunate to have access to, some great musicians.
Right.
I also looked at the lifestyle that some of them lived, and it wasn't a lifestyle that I was willing to accept for myself and my future family. And I knew I was going to have kids and that sort of thing. So, that lifestyle is an issue. It's not about things.
Right.
Life's not about things and belongings, but it is about, providing a nice level of existence for your children and that sort of thing. At least in my mind.
Sure.
Some folks might just be solely about the music, but
Right.
I think that life's balance
Right.
kind of creates some resonance in music.
Right.
Whether that be struggle or struggle to support and achieve, or
Sure.
all those things.
But there is a real reality in the realm of jazz that the money isn't flowing like it is in other musical genres, so you almost do have to have a business acumen.
I don't necessarily agree with that statement.
Okay.
I think yes, in the larger, the economic impact in the U.S.
Right.
From just record sales. I think what you're talking about is record sales.
Right.
But from a GDP, like if you look at Kansas City, what businesses, venues, whatever, are supported by and collaboratively jazz music, as opposed to contemporary R&B?
Right.
Is there more contemporary R&B being played in Kansas City live in restaurants, clubs, and otherwise?
No.
In our airport.
Yeah.
So jazz is here as record sales? No.
Yeah,
People
right.
are buying, some national, radio shit.
Yeah. Right.
Are people finding your radio station or,
Right.
your show as compared to 101 the Fox?
Yeah, right.
They're finding 101 the Fox and
Sure.
they're buying those records.
Right.
But when it comes to going into a venue and
Right.
going to hang out,
Right.
by and large, in Kansas City, you're hearing jazz.
That's right.
And so when we look at the lifestyle, I would also say that jazz musicians have the ability, I'm not saying they're all doing it, but to make far more revenue than the R&B guy,
Yeah.
unless they make that 101 the Fox level,
Right.
right?
Right.
Corporate,
Right.
controlled deal.
Yeah. Which isn't as prevalent.
Right. So 6 figures,
Yeah.
pretty easy to do.
Right. Interesting. Because I always hear how much of a struggle it is to get regular gigs. So that's the one thing I always hear when you do get a regular gig. Like you get a guy in Boston that gets a regular at Wally's, they're in. I mean, there's a level of you that's kind of in the club, and when you get that regular gig, it just makes everything more fluid and. I don't know, I always come from that music standpoint, how good it would be to be able to be in front of a crowd at a regular interval to grow as a musician, but there's also that part of you that needs to live. So if you have a regular gig, it makes it easier to live. So, and I guess that feeds into what I was going to ask about collectively about education. I always hear, the one thing about education is it subsidizes what you do as a performer. I mean, you have to have some level of experience, which is what I wanted to establish with you, so that your students understand that you played. But you also, in this world too, need to have some level of supplemental money or something that backs that up. Do you think that's the case with all of these programs that are around the United States in jazz?
I think it depends. We talk about, Bobby and I routinely talk about, what does it look like to land a university gig, right? So at some institutions, it's, you have to have the DMA.
Right.
And no professional experience. That doesn't fly.
Right.
So the professional experience outside is necessary. I don't really know how to answer that. I think it's unique for everybody.
Right.
I think there's some tremendous folks who come into education late in the game, maybe aren't gigging as much anymore, and that's okay because they may have the experience. You got an old guy who's just got all the wisdom in the world and has been around. Where do you want to have the guy who's teaching your jazz history class, to go with the textbook, or do you want the guy to pontificate and speak from experience?
Right.
I prefer the latter.
Right.
Not just book.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I really think it depends on the institution. I think to some degree it depends on state funding.
Right.
But experience counts.
Yeah, totally. Talk to me about your time at UMKC, when you got there, and just kind of give me kind of a history of your time at UMKC.
Started teaching there in 2000, and I was playing a ton, so over 300 hits a year forever.
Yeah.
And the time my son was he 4, 5? But full-time opportunity happened, and I wrestled with that a little bit and decided that if I'm coming in, I would like to make a bona fide jazz studies degree. At the time that I was teaching adjunct, I was teaching some core classes, but the degree was largely a traditional music degree, which is commonplace, right? I mean, music education's been going on in this country for an awfully long time.
Yeah.
Jazz studies is new, just jazz in general is new, so to try to implement that into pre-existing curricula at universities is, what we're doing is actually groundbreaking nationally. So rewrote the degree. It kind of was one of the things that was kind of contingent on, my coming in. Didn't know whether it would pass or not.
Right.
And we decided that we would do a musicianship sequence that was focused in the idiom that students want to pursue.
Right.
And at that point, it made recruiting easier.
Yeah.
And the program has significantly blossomed. I mean, we are significantly larger.
Yeah.
And the kids are great. Programmatically, we're I think we've been producing some fantastic performers, and I mean, you can't go out in Kansas City and not hear a student involved from our program, either an alum or a current student. They're everywhere.
Yeah.
In every band, by and large, I mean, I'm going to go on 90%, right?
Yeah.
That has assisted, and now we're graduating, larger populations of guys, but we're graduating guys within that pillar system, so that some guys are performing more than others.
Right.
Some guys are teaching more than others. Some guys are composing and arranging more than others. Some guys are. But I think most everybody is working within all of those.
Yeah, yeah. How do you recruit? Do you go out on the road? Do you?
Yeah, it's largely road driven. A couple things that we've done just kind of strategically is we are running large full page ads in the National Trade magazine, Downbeat, right?
Yeah.
And Jazz Times. We do go to the Gen Conference every year, and we set up a big booth, and we have students man that because it's not great for a faculty member to be pitching.
Yeah.
So we just leave the kids alone to talk with other kids, and that's advantageous for us. But a lot of the times, it's road driven. So I do a lot of university jazz festivals as a guest artist.
Right.
And you give a clinic, and then you spend time in the trenches with guys, and all of a sudden you've got some opportunity, and students are very much interested in that. And then the backup is, okay, Umkc, well, I think I just saw them in Downbeat, or I just saw this guy, and look, in Downbeat there's Umkc's in Downbeat, and I give my cell phone number out a lot, and I'm constantly dealing with students, and it's a lot of effort.
Yeah.
I mean, how much time did I spend with you?
I mean, before I came here, I remember spending hours on the phone with Dan all the time, and in person when I visited. So
yeah. So let me get into you guys here, and what I want you to do, I'm going to toggle between you guys. Tell me your full name, your year, your instrument, and then I want you to tell me, that'll start the dialogue here, what brought you to UMKC.
So I'm Jacob Schwartzburg. I'm a freshman. I'm a saxophone player. And
from?
Thanks. I'm from Denver, Colorado.
Okay.
And so I remember the first time I heard about UMKC was through a friend who came here to study classical saxophone. And the only thing that I knew about the jazz program at that point was that Bobby taught here. And I was like, and I'm sure that's the case with a lot of people. Bobby, that's a big name. Seems like it's worth checking out.
Yeah.
And when I first came to visit, I honestly wasn't all that interested in UMKC. And then I got here, sat in on the 11 o'clock lab band rehearsal, talked with some people, met Dan, and from then I was like, this is the place to be. like, one of the things that stuck out to me the most was that everybody was so just, like, open to, like, new people and, like, very friendly and, you know, conducive to creating a good environment to learn and play music.
Cool.
So that's something when a kid comes, right? So he came, I had him sit in with the big band immediately.
Yeah.
And then I put him loose with students for the day.
Yeah.
And we set him up with a tour, I think, of the Mar Sound Archive, which is the world's largest recorded sound archive.
Incredible.
So, like,
Yeah.
I go see Chuck.
Right.
I have a student tour them through there, and it's just like, there's so much.
It's like Moses
blessings here.
parting the vinyl.
Exactly.
Yeah. Wow.
Exactly.
So let's do the same thing.
Yeah.
Intro, give me your background, where you're from, and tell me what brought you to UMKC.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Josh Blythe. From Columbia, Missouri. I'm a first-year grad student. Play drum set. So what brought me to UMKC? I'd come to the camp, the jazz camp. The guy that I was studying with in Columbia taught some of the folks that came to UMKC as well. So I remember coming to the camp, meeting all the faculty, loving it there, and then getting to hear folks like Brian Stever and Zach Beeson, these guys that are from Central Missouri, was kind of eye-opening, and then getting to hear from them and other people how great the scene was, not just with jazz. It was a diverse scene. Was really interested in blues and rock and stuff like that as well.
Yeah.
So, great scene, great school. I remember coming and taking a tour, seeing the big band play. I think I didn't sit in, but I came into your guys' rehearsal, and it was just killing. I hadn't heard a big band up close like that before. Then getting to go around and check out some of the combos that were happening. I think I heard like Ryan Lee and Andrew Olette playing in a combo together, and just being a young high school student, I was like, oh man, this is the place.
He did
to
his
be.
undergrad with us too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Cool.
Took a year off. And
Yeah.
Very good. So this is a collective question here. We can go around. What are your expectations? What are your expectations of the students, and what are your expectations of the program?
me first.
Yeah.
Expectations, honestly, artistically satisfied and financially independent, right? I mean, those things are important.
Yeah.
So, I mean, outside of that, I think if folks are able to play artistic gigs
Yeah.
and not have to just, like, play dinner bell,
Right.
right? But play artistic gigs,
Yeah.
they're going to be satisfied musically and then, financially independent or, able to make a good living.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So those expectations have definitely evolved, because I think a lot of times when students come in, it's I just want to learn how to play well.
Yeah.
I want to be a great player. But definitely over the years and getting to know Dan more, it's not just about playing well. It's being financially independent and having some sort of future in it.
Yeah. Yeah.
He owns a house.
Yeah. Cool. There you go. Hey.
First year masters.
Yeah.
Like-
That's nice. Yeah.
Or do you own it? I don't know.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well,
yeah,
yeah.
you're in there.
Yeah. That's it. When you're in, you're in.
But you dig though, right?
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. Totally. How about you?
It's kind of the same, part of the draw to coming to UMKC opposed to some of the other schools I was looking at is that this is, like Dan was talking about before, the 5-pillar thing that really, stuck out to me, I want to come to school and graduate not just being a good player, but being able to promote myself and sustain myself, because if I don't have to work a 8 to 5 job every day sitting in a cubicle, I don't want to.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess that's another question, and I guess it seems rhetorical, but I want to hear it in your words. What do you want after graduation? What do you want out of a student after graduation? What do you want? Like, after all of the educational dust settles, what do you want?
Sort of just an extension of kind of the things I'm doing now. I've been fortunate enough to, since being in Kansas City, I haven't had to do any job that wasn't related to music. I've been able to teach, I've been able to play. So once I'm done with school, I definitely want to continue that, do some of my own personal projects, but just teach at a different level.
Sure.
I'd probably say the same. I'm not teaching at this point, but I'd like to. I see myself teaching and playing as much as possible, and sustaining myself that way, and hopefully not having a job that is outside of music.
Yeah.
Yeah, and my deal routinely is one of the early questions is, so 4 years from now, right? Freshman, 5 years from now, 2 years from now, what are you doing? What am I telling everybody you're doing? Everybody has a different story. So we're extremely proud of our alum who have landed, college teaching gigs.
Yeah.
And they're playing at a world-class level, right?
Yeah.
We're extremely proud of our alum who are primarily playing and kind of giving the one-off clinics as they travel about and do their thing.
Yeah.
Every story is unique, right? So, Bobby and I arrived together with different backgrounds, doing similar things, but different backgrounds because we're from a different generation and we're completely different people.
Yeah.
And, we end up being collaboratively two of the closest people you're going to meet.
Yeah.
And able to work extremely well together through the understanding of, hard work, ambition, respect for the history, and the future, and being open-minded.
Yeah.
And so, what do you expect? I mean, the expectation is success, but it really boils down to kind of that first one, in what ways are you hustling?
Yeah.
Because we can prepare all these other things. It's just important that we talk about that first one, which is entrepreneurship. You are a business. You're a business owner.
Yeah, yeah. So the one thing too about getting into not only education but getting into jazz is you're only as good as the shoulders you stand on. So talk to me about early teachers, advice, leadership you saw, anything that resonates that made you say you either want to teach or you want to perform or you want to further this after high school because this is my life.
For me, I had what I'd say a unique experience growing up because from 6th to 12th grade, I attended an arts high school, well, middle and high school, and so everybody, what I did every day was heavily based in the arts and music, even in my academic classes. And so all of my mentors and the people around me were kind of, it was kind of, at first, kind of forced upon us, you're here because you're going to perform, and that's kind of what you're going to end up doing with your life. You're going to perform or teach because you decided to go into music early on.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to make it sound like a bad thing because that's what I want to do, but everybody around me was kind of making the decision for us because we were young enough to be impressionable, and so
Russia. That's the reality.
But so now here I am, and I accepted that rather than rejected it, and that's where I'm going.
Cool.
Yeah. Like I said, my teacher in Columbia, Lloyd Warden, he was a huge influence on me growing up. Because up until I had met him, I wasn't, super familiar with jazz, more so on the blues side of things. And he just kind of opened my eyes, in terms of performance and in terms of teaching. It was great taking lessons from him, but I really kind of went in whenever I decided that music was what I wanted to do, I started really listening to him and how he taught and how he talked and how he played, and I really started to hone in on that because I really knew I wanted to be a teacher one day. That's always been the case, and I've always wanted to be a performer.
Yeah.
So he definitely influenced me in those ways.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in Canada, music trumps sports. So, you go to a basketball game or a hockey game or a rugby game. We didn't really have football at the high school.
Right.
Sparse attendance.
Yeah.
Band concerts were huge.
Yeah.
There was a lot of support for it. We don't have marching bands. We don't support anything. I mean, the community really supported the arts. I had some tremendous music teachers, and I mean, very, very early on, and I mean, we talked about the early thing. So I played from a heart place heavily, and I had some great private teachers, but I had a 7th grade concert band jazz teacher, and he's like, man, you already play, so you can just go out there. And then he would routinely pull me out of my classes to cut, to work on improv, and just comp and whatever, and turn me onto a bunch of records. So I was, man, really, I don't have to go to math class.
Right.
I can just go jam with my band teacher, it was just like,
that makes sense.
It was it, man. I mean, it was, that was it. Dale Gallant, I think he's in Toronto now, but Dale Gallant, I need to write him.
Yeah.
Just
Nice.
say, hey, man, look,
Yeah.
you planted a seed there,
Yeah.
bro. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. So, obviously, with UMKC and with what we're talking about here, the very big elephant in the room is Kansas City. There's so many ways that you can process this town, from the history of jazz to barbecue to any other thing, its affordability, all of these things. So my question is this: why do you love this town? I mean, talk to me a little bit about not only the jazz scene, but this city, Kansas City. What do you like about it?
Supports the arts in general. Like, seriously, right? Culinary arts, support it. I mean, there's great restaurants in Kansas City. Like, great restaurants.
Yeah.
Farm to table or otherwise, right? It's like, it's happening. The coffee here is as good as anywhere.
Yeah.
If you get away from the chains, unfortunately in the neighborhood over here, they've got a local spot, and then one of those scooters opens up right next door.
Always.
And so the local spot puts a big sign up and says, locally owned coffee, right? And
Absolutely.
It's like, everybody's going to boycott, we live at a lake. It's like, you're not going to get the scooters going here, man. You're not going to put out a local.
Ain't gonna happen.
But food, arts in general. We've got a great theater scene in Kansas City. Our music scene is top notch, but in a variety of lanes. It's not just a jazz town.
Right.
If you like barbecue, I do.
Yeah.
Barbecue's better than anywhere in the world.
Uh-huh.
I say that because we live here, but it's totally true.
It's true.
And some other advantages here too are just the. We've got more highway miles than anywhere, so you're 30 minutes from anywhere.
Yeah.
Almost at any hour of the day.
Uh-huh.
Rush hour takes an extra 10 minutes. When I was living on the West Coast, I mean, you could be sitting in a car for 7 hours, parked. That's when I would put late John Coltrane on for my brother. I gave them an analogy and feedback. I was like, man, when we get parked on I-5, my brother and I are both kind of hot-headed. And so, but for me, the relaxation was, I can put on train.
Yeah.
Well, I would put on like Interstellar Space or something, and my brother would just get, like, I just see him get, God damn it, Dad, you're making us worse, I can't deal with it. So, and when I was driving, he would like put on Bon Jovi just to piss me off.
Yeah,
so I'm
sure.
like, come on, man.
Karma's a bitch, man.
Yeah, that's it. Exactly. But I think the city just in general, I mean, you talk about the affordability, I mean, you can make a living here and live a fantastic existence and have all the blessings that are, anywhere. Outside of Yakitori. You don't have a Yakitori spot in Kansas City, unfortunately.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Which is a business proposal we'll talk about.
Yeah, I'm into it. It's funny you mentioned Coltrane. I interviewed Michelle Coltrane last week, and I had told her I'd referenced Brian Haas from Jacob Fred, and he told me one time, he said, Joe, I'm just not a real religious guy. I don't really read the Bible, but I listen to John Coltrane every day, and I told her that. She totally loved it. Like, totally, because you got to figure, being the daughter of a Coltrane dynasty, she's heard everything. And, but yeah, that's it. If you're stuck in a car, I was just listening to him on the way over, and it's just like,
it's spiritual.
Oh, man. I mean, when Giant Steps came on, it was just like, done. It's like, boom, you're transformed.
Yeah.
You're on another planet. But anyway.
I drove my family off the interstate at 70 miles an hour. Well, I'd been going 75. Minivan, traveling up. We're going to go to Canada, go to Mom's place, And my wife's just like, what's going on? I'm like, sorry, Crescent. I went into a trance.
Yeah.
I can't not listen to it. I can't do anything else when that record is on. It's my record.
Yeah.
And she's like, sweetheart, I hate to say it, but you can't listen to Crescent.
Yeah.
When you're behind the wheel anymore.
Right. It's a drug addiction. I've talked about that. It's like the beginnings of jazz. It can be a drug addiction. It's a safe one, but it can take you there. It can veer you right off the road. And that's it.
Yeah.
So let me get from you guys about Kansas City, especially as you came into the fold here. You were attracted to the program. You're in the city. Yeah. What is it?
A lot of the same things. I'm a total coffee junkie, so all these local places are great. There's always something new going on around the town, and like we said, it's not just jazz. You can go to the Green Lady and listen to stuff, or you could go out to Knuckleheads and listen to blues and rock and stuff like that. And all these places are always bringing in new artists, and that's one of the things I really enjoy.
Nice.
I spent a lot less time in Kansas City than these guys have. But one of the biggest things that I've noticed, especially about like the music scene, is that it's super, like Kansas City in general is super similar to what I know back home in Denver. It's, there are a lot of similarities, but the big thing here is that it's like so accessible and like it's so easy to go out and listen to music and not, spend like $60 or something.
Yeah.
Because, there's great music happening in Denver too, but you go out and break the bank and it's, it's not worth it.
Yeah.
Like it's great music, but if you can't do it, you can't do it. And here it's so different, you can go out and hear just as good music and have a great time and do so many other things that like it's so easy to do.
Yeah. We just don't have dispensaries here. The one thing that I've always asked about with the educational programs here, it seems as though there was an era where people would get educated and they were like, I'm going to the Mecca, I'm going to New York City, or I'm going to Frisco, or I'm going San Francisco. I know that makes San Franciscans upset when you don't say San Francisco. But what I'm seeing now more with the programs is that people are staying here, like a Herman Mahari is staying here. There's a lot of these guys. I know he's splitting time with Paris now, but his home base is here. Is there more of a focus from an educational standpoint, or is there a mentality that's getting kind of by osmosis put into the students?
I think the idea that there's a Mecca, if you will. I mean, it's a global society now.
Yeah.
So where do you want to live?
True.
You can fly in and play New York.
Yeah.
And I mean, New York's got some great musicians, but cost of living is extremely high, and the gigs, frankly, by and large, don't pay any more than they pay here.
Wow.
So what do you do to supplement, right? That cost of living, population density obviously increases value.
Yeah.
And it's difficult in the arts if you're making six figures in New York, you're not living in a grandiose place.
Right.
And six figures here is like $50K on current living, $50K, properly invested, and you're getting set.
Yeah, yeah. Talk to me about the health of this scene. The Kansas City scene, it seems to me, when I started my show, for instance, I really kind of wrapped my head around this scene and tried to figure out what's going on.
What year was that?
2011.
Okay.
And I'm doing my 530th show this week. So
wow.
Yeah,
good for you, man.
Yeah, thank you. So it's been a long journey, and I've really followed this scene, and it always seems to me as though I always hear better and more positive things. There's more inclusiveness. There's more people that are pulling other people. Say Deborah Brown's pulling younger cats into the fold. Bob Bowman's coming back from national exposure and really pulling newer people in. There's just so many things about it, and people are welcome. You don't hear about that in other cities as much. So I don't want to put any words in your mouth, but how do you feel about Kansas City successfully as the years go on? I mean, I've seen this for six and a half years now, and it always seems like it's getting better. It's maturating like a wine.
I will say, like, I agree with you, but I will tell you, I mean, when I came here in '99, I felt very much that there was a spirit of collaboration and openness. I don't know that the audience members at the time were ready for what was happening musically amongst musicians, per se.
Right.
So, you had some folks who would come to a jazz club and it was, we want to hear old guard stuff. Whereas, like the American Songbook, okay? Or Kansas City's traditional sound. So I think it was thrust upon musicians maybe, or confused by folks that it was the musicians not getting along. That's not the case. I mean,
right.
Lucky, Rusty, Tommy, they were all very much interested and open to the music that I made in '99.
Right.
Willing to come over and go through a rehearsal to play original music for a night.
Yeah.
I mean, and be very, very happy doing so.
Yeah.
So I think that spirit of musicians, I mean, just by and large, jazz musicians, you have to be open.
Yeah.
You have to be adaptable.
Yeah.
And I don't think that spirit has maybe ever not been part of the fabric of people who make this music.
Yeah.
Whether it be old guard or not.
Right.
And the collaboration, I think, continues now.
Yeah.
I think the difference in what's happening today as compared to 10 years ago is, simply put, and I'm sure other programs, but I can speak to ours, is just the volume of quality students.
Yeah.
He's a freshman and you played Friday and Saturday, right? I mean, that's, and the whole band's freshmen,
Yep.
Yeah.
and they played, where were you Saturday?
California.
Yeah, so they
Very
played
nice.
California Saturday, but like, they're getting gigs.
Yeah.
And they're, they're young.
Yeah.
Right? And last night, Lauer's big band had, Jim Lauer's big band.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so it's like, it's a diversity of guys.
Yeah.
Some UMKC guys, some guys who do jazz as a living, some guys who wanted to do jazz as a living but fell into a 40-hour work week job but are still great players,
Sure.
Some UNT educated in the heyday killers.
Yeah, right.
Like real ballers.
Yeah.
They're real jazz musicians who, supplement. And so I think the spirit of collaboration is, every bit as healthy. I think the volume of young folk is more significant, and probably the quality of those guys, of just being able to participate in the dialogue on stage.
Yeah.
Not necessarily needing as much, thumb down, right? At
Sure.
a jam session or otherwise.
Sure.
I think that's there. And then we have lost the elders,
Yeah.
who were directly linked to Kansas City's heyday. So, now you've got my generation and Bobby's generation and Bowman's generation and
Yeah.
Stan and those guys. But, we grew up, with the hardbop movement having kind of happened, and that's different.
Yeah.
Because that music was very much collaborative in its spirit. So,
Yeah.
the Blue Note records were seminal.
Yeah, without a doubt. How do you feel about the scene?
That's a hard question to answer because I feel like I'm still learning about new people in Kansas City all the time. Whenever I came to Kansas City, I was told, go see this person, go see this person, go see this person. So from my perspective, it always seems like it's growing. There always seems to be something new going on. So like the Black Dolphin, how long has that been open? Not
Less than a year.
Yeah, less than a year.
Mega complex.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
But thank God.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. So it's and it's great to see in just that little pocket the the diversity of the music that's going on.
Yeah.
You can hear organ jazz, or you can see Eddie Moore at the Black Dolphin. So it's super diverse over there.
Yeah.
That's what I really appreciate seeing.
And they're pulling in national people.
Yeah.
Greg Osby's coming in.
International.
Yeah.
I mean,
I talked to Steve Hobbs and had a good conversation with him. He's coming in. He talked to John. Kyle Eastwood, Clint Eastwood's sons, want to come in through town. There's a lot of people that are just like, where can we play here in town? And I've been kind of saying, Green Lady's got a lot of action going on. Blue Room always does, but there's chances here if you want to come through. And I think people are.
John's been great.
Oh man, a beacon.
Yeah.
So how do you feel about the scene in Kansas City?
Kind of like I was saying before, I love it here, and I feel like I've only been here a short time, and I feel like I've tried to hit the scene as hard as I can and meet a ton of people, and kind of like Josh was saying, still I know like nobody, and I'm there's so much music that I haven't been exposed to that I need to and that I'm excited to. But kind of like I was saying before, I think something that I love is that it's really easy to get out and meet people and play, and here I am, a second semester freshman, and I'm already gigging. I've only been here since August, and so I don't think that I could have done that if I had just moved to Denver or somewhere else. It's different for sure.
Yeah. Thing I always try to do on my show is put as many new people on there as I can, and that's the thing that blows me away about jazz, just like the learning curve. It's like there's always new players, there's always new things going on, and even with existing players, there's always these offshoots, there's things that are going on. And the thing that always blows me away is how quick you guys can get to the studio and record something. Like Radiohead's going to the studio, they'll be in there for the next 6 months. You're like, oh my God. And this guy's like, yeah, we did it last afternoon. I'm like, wait, hold on a second. Radiohead took an afternoon to have a burger while they were waiting to think about what they were going to do. It's like, it's weird. It's amazing how fast it works, but I don't know if is that attributable to the nature of improv or the fact that you're so well oiled? I don't know. What do you think it is?
Over preparation, right?
Yeah.
For an unknown.
Yeah, I like it. It's like life. It's like
Yeah.
the only thing that you can bank on is change.
Yeah.
and you just got to go with it.
That's right.
So, the one thing that I always like to do, and the one thing that I've tried really hard over the years with doing interviews, is I don't want to learn from a textbook, and I guess this is going to kind of blur some lines metaphorically with what we're talking about here. I want to talk to you guys about it, and what I've noticed doing these is there's a level of preservation that goes into this, and there's also a level of kind of the Olympic torch getting passed on from Jay McShann to you, to Bobby, to all of these generations that are moving this on. You're in this position now as younger players. You're in this position as a player and as an educator. What obligation do you have as an educator and a performer to keep this torch going, to keep that spirit of Sonny Rollins, so to speak, going? All of these guys, the Jazz Jedi Council that I like to call them. That's what I'm saying. We're in the church of now. I like it. Yeah, that's it. And it's these voices. It's keeping that going. And I don't think it comes from a fear of that it's going to get extinguished. I think it's keeping that vigor going, because a lot of these guys that I've interviewed and talked to, they weren't even cognizant of it. Like Chuck Israels, for instance. I'm like, talk to me about that era. What were you guys doing? Did you know what you were doing? No, we were just doing it. And then everybody freaked out and made a huge deal out of it. It was this era, this 10-year period, this idiom. It was like it just turned into this huge thing, but they were just doing what they were doing. So I guess I'm coming back to my original thing. What obligation, if you do have one, do you have to keep this jazz baton moving on down the line? Not just moving, but with vigor.
Oh man, that's a loaded.
I said too much.
No. I mean, I'm just trying to formulate my thought here. So much music has inspired us, right? So I think you can't you can't extinguish the ignition switch, right? And so like again for me, like discovering Cannonball and Bird was the thing that I aspired to like be at the time. If you're a basketball player and you watch Michael Jordan play, do you want to steal all his moves? If he was the guy, like Kobe wanted to, Kobe's like, show me. He became his own player.
Yeah.
But I mean, his fall away was Michael Jordan's fall away, and he attributes, a fair amount of what he learned. He had his God-given talent, right? He nurtured nature. Jordan inspired him to realize that he had the nature to maybe do something with that, right?
Yeah.
And then further that, and then continues to grow as a player in, if you will, in competition, and so jazz musicians and vamping, and you're going to have to clean this up and make me sound articulate.
Yeah.
But like jazz musicians, you hit the stage. So everything that I do at home, practice-wise, right? I shed. That means very little until I hit the stage with a bunch of people who have shed. Mm-hmm. So if I'm at 100% here right now, just balling, and I'm at 100%, right? I get my horn down and away we go. When I hit the stage with 4 other guys who are at 100%, 75% of what I'm going to do is be adaptable, right? And I'm going to contribute 25% to a live, evolving conversation. And there's a cast of characters. So when you get a cast of characters who are creative,
right,
and prepared and well-oiled and understand music, something's going to happen.
Yeah.
And that begs, like, we're preparing for future moments that don't exist.
Mm-hmm.
And I know nothing if I don't study Charlie Parker as a jazz musician. There's a difference between jazz improvisation and improvisation.
Mm-hmm.
I improvise in my garage all the time. I mean, you walk by a motorcycle lift, and I made a bunch of parts for my dream motorcycle, that I wanted when I was a little kid, and restored that bike. And I'm like,
yeah, right.
But, I can play around with tools and right and left brain thinking and all that stuff. Very, very creative person and an improviser. But when it comes to jazz, there was a language developed and mastered and honed that many of us are trying to chase. That doesn't mean, like, I'll circle back. Our students routinely, when they show up to see me play, and you've seen me play, they expect to hear bebop. Because of the way I teach at school, it's a bebop tradition thing. By and large, first and foremost, it's like you got to go through the bebop tradition.
Yeah.
And it's like, man, I'm surprised when I come out and hear you play that it's not just bebop all night.
Yeah.
Huh. Like, well, no, you have to go through it, and then
Yeah.
now you can do what you want to do.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I think we rob and pull from a variety of sources, and that global community, global society of music, that's where it's at. So from a curator's standpoint, you can't go around Bird.
Yeah. It's interesting you mentioned
Bebop in
language.
general.
Yeah. And it's
go around
interesting
bebop.
you mentioned the language, because it's interesting that even just music itself is the universal shared language, but there's a jazz language.
There is. It's
You
a
know.
dialect.
Yeah.
And you can hear the difference. And frankly, there's a history of harmony.
Yeah.
Swing players played a very particular way with very particular harmonic sensibilities. And then bebop came along, and bebop has its own harmonic sensibilities
Yeah.
that are just entirely unique to itself.
Yeah.
And then hard bop came along, and each one was an adaptation, and I don't want to call it an advance, but
Yeah.
just, okay, this is now okay.
Yeah.
If we're rule breakers, right? This is now okay if we're rule breakers.
Yeah.
This is now okay if we're rule breakers.
Yeah.
And some folks can confuse, the improvisation aspect, like how did avant-garde come? How did cool come out? Why did bebop happen? Like all of these things were responses, but they kind of moved mirroring social change in America too.
Yeah. Right.
So swing is the global thing, and then the war, and then beboppers are like, I don't want to be confined by big band charts and whatever, so we're just going to improvise. And sometimes they would just blow over, Tin Pan Alley chord, with no head, just go.
Yeah.
It became an artistic outlet.
Yeah.
And then, well, we don't want to be confined by these chord changes.
Yeah.
So we're breaking away chains.
Yeah.
You kind of get the avant-garde and the free movement, right? Cool. Let's go back to focusing on charts. It's Western European. We're gonna look at bringing those instruments in, and okay, well, so cool happens, and then all of a sudden you've got hard bop saying, well, we're not dealing with that Western European shit. We're going to start going back with the church and and bring in the African American tradition and come up with our own harmonies and our own rhythm. And you watch the evolution of the rhythm section where they become a very important part of the improvisation of the ensemble.
Yeah.
Versus just being timekeepers.
Yeah.
I mean, you watch what's happening in society in America at that time, and it's like, wow. I mean, it's social change.
Just like with swinger and big band, it was like, shit, the war's over. We're going to go home, we're going to make a bunch of babies, we're going to get the baby boomers, we're going to dance. We don't want to worry about World War II anymore. I mean, there's just so many things that go into it. I remember one time Randy Weston talked about how the origins of jazz, and it parted a huge curtain for me, how it happened. And he said, because he's been to Africa so much, everything swings there.
Oh, yeah.
Tails, trees, people. And it was just like, wow, like that's all I needed to hear. Like the etymology, the beginnings, the origin, the big bang, I needed to hear that from someone like him, because that's it. Yep. And then boom, it's just like everything just scattered, all the notes went out, and then everybody's grabbing them and putting them in their thing, and Bird and everybody's doing their thing. It's interesting. So before we depart here, tell me what you think your obligation as a student, performer, young musician in this town, what do you think?
Yeah, kind of going off of that and what's already kind of going on at UMKC. We're expected to learn the language, but it doesn't stop there. We're not just recreating what's already happened. We're encouraged to move forward with it and create our own voice with it. So the language of it, it's not, if it's jazz, it's not going to go away. It's always going to be there. But we're, like I said, always encouraged to create something new, and that's personal.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I could have said it better myself. It's just that, Dan always talks about, being a curator and an innovator, and it's about, recognizing that you have to start somewhere and start with the tradition of bebop and, really the jazz language and all that, but that, it's also equally as important once you've done that to, do something new and find, like Josh said, find your own voice and explore new music and try new things.
So my final question here is, we've delved into the past, we've gotten into a historical context, we've talked about the present, there's always the future, the unknown. Whether it's Kansas City, your future, UMKC's future, talk to me about the future. You can take it wherever you want to go from there. Jazz overall, just the future.
That's a heavy question.
I always save the best for last.
Right.
Well, I mean, I guess, the near future, I'll be here at UMKC until I graduate, and then from there, I anticipate staying in Kansas City for a while. Who knows what'll happen in the moment, but I guess that's the way, life and music is also. But I mean, other than that, kind of like we talked about before, I want to be, performing and educating and, carrying on the tradition of jazz and just music in general, because I think a world where we don't have music to enjoy sounds pretty awful.
Yeah.
So, I think that's the most important, thing for me looking forward.
Yeah, about the future, we don't know what's going to happen, but I think with UMKC, they've given Dan and Bobby and everybody's given everybody the tools they need to be susceptible to change, no matter what that is, Kansas City might not be the place I stay forever, but wherever I go, I'm going to be able to be, financially independent, and I'm going to be able to play. So.
Yeah, that's a good question. It's day by day, right?
Yeah.
I mean, plans are to have UMKC, be one of those institutions, frankly, that is, I thought of top of mind for precisely the reasons that they say. We are moving forward quite quickly, as you've seen, and I think we're establishing a national and international presence, and as long as we're consistent with our flexibility and adaptability, I think we'll be a household name at the school. As for me, adapt and continue to move forward and pursue all things that I want to pursue.
Cool. Anything else you want to add?
What about you? What's your future?
My future?
Thanks for listening and tuning in to yet another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in Kansas City, Canada, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Dan, Josh, Jacob, and everyone from UMKC giving their time and their hustle to Kansas City. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino in the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com. For everything Neon Jazz, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.